Welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. For the past few weeks, we've been discussing the Quran, and we're discussing the authenticity of the Quran. Now, but really, in the past few weeks, we've gone through 6 reasons. We're on the 7th one as to why the Quran is authentic. Now, the one we're on is discussing the numerical miracles of the Quran. We've discussed this a little bit last week, but we didn't finish on it. So please go ahead, continue. Let's talk about the numerical miracles. Give us a brief overview of what you've already talked about, and then let's go on from there.
Well, last week we looked at the fact that if we consider the chapter numbers and the number of verses within each chapter, the numbers align in such a way that gives the impression that, first of all, the Quran has been preserved, because had it not been kept as it originally was, the numbers would now be all out of whack. Second, the numbers are such that we have here a piece of evidence that the Quran was divinely planned. No human beings planned it to work out like this. And when we see evidence of design in anything, we attribute the design to a designer. Here too, there is evidence that the Quran, in fact, has been designed, and that proves that it has a designer, and that designer is God, who the Quran claims to be the one to have revealed the Quran in the first place. Basically, what we have shown is that if we take all of the chapter numbers of the Quran, we compare those with the number of verses in each chapter, we take the total of each chapter number with its number of verses, we'll get 114 results. Of those results, surprisingly, 57 or even 57 are odd. A surprising match in terms of the equivalence of the two numbers here. Second, if we were to add up all of the odd numbers in these among these 114 results, the 57 odd numbers here will give us a grand total, which is the same total as the total number of verses of the entire Quran, and that is surprising. And on the other hand, if we look at the even number totals, the total of that entire group of numbers, which comes only from 57 chapters, actually is the total number of verses from the entire Quran. And to get this double correspondence dealing with such large numbers cannot just simply be attributed to correspondence. It must be by a plan, and it was never by any human plan. We know the history of the Quran, how it came to be written, how it came to be compiled, how it came to be preserved and transmitted throughout the ages, through memory and through written work, but never through a consistent and cohesive plan from among human beings to make it look this way or that way. The fact that we're finding this out now means that there is a divine plan. It looks like the Quran has actually been encoded in this way to guarantee its authenticity. You know, our passports have what is called a check digit, which means that after all of the details about you at the bottom of your passport page, which are given in electronic format, there are check digits to make sure that the details cannot be changed. Because if one changes the details, let's say his date of birth, he wouldn't know what effect that will have on the total structure, including the check digits. The Quran here seems to have been encoded with check digits. When we put all of these numbers together in a worksheet and we see the amazing coincidence and correspondence between the grand totals, we know that nothing has been changed, because if anyone now goes and changes one verse in one chapter, it will affect the total results. And the fact that the results are now all in place means that nobody has changed a verse in a chapter or even moved a chapter from its proper place and position as it is now in the Quran.
Now let's go on to something new then. That's what we covered last week. What do you have for us this week?
Well, some observers have noticed that there are words in the Quran which are related to each other either from the fact of their similarity in meaning or from their opposite meanings or some other sort of relationship, and that these numbers occur in the Quran a number of times, which bear significance in the sense that somebody wanted it to be this number. Let's think, for example, of the Quran saying that Jesus is like Adam. What the Quran means in terms of its message is that Jesus and Adam are both creatures of God. And so in that respect, they're both similar to God. They're both equal in the eyes of God. Now, it is interesting that in the Quran, the name Jesus occurs 25 times, and the name Adam also occurs 25 times. So this is another way in which they're equal, and we only discover that now when we have the whole Quran written before us and we can prepare a concordance, and then we can see how many times the names occur in the Quran, and amazingly, they're each a number of 20, same number of times in the entire Quran. And many people make the point that men and women are equal. And it is interesting that if you count the number of times that men is mentioned in the Quran in the singular, again, we're dealing with the Arabic text, however, so we're not counting English translated words. So in the Arabic text, the singular for man is rajul, and for woman is imra'a. It turns out that rajul, man, occurs 24 times. Imra'a, woman, also occurs 24 times. Some words are used as antonyms of each other, or at least as antithesis of each other. So we think of dunya and akhirah, this world and the life hereafter. The word for dunya, this life, occurs 115 times in the Quran, and for the life hereafter also 115 times. So now, how can you write a book, and then at the end of having written this book, you go back over it and you say, okay, how many times have I used that word? And how many times have I used the opposite word? And then it turns out to be exactly the same number of times. Now, this would be a remarkable coincidence. And if that was just one thing that occurred, you would say, okay, that's just one little coincidence. But if it seems to be occurring again and again, you have a phenomenon. The word for angel, malaika, in the singular in the Quran occurs 68 times. The word for devil, shaitan, occurs also 68 times. So you have, a contrast between malaika, angel, and shaitan, devil. And we can go on and on about this sort of coincidence and the use of words in the Quran and a number of times of their occurrences, and see that the Quran was put together by a mind which is not the minds of the men who worked on the Quran. This is not the work of man, but a divine revelation from God.
Thank you, Brother Shabir.